This is the noob, and in this video I'm going to be doing a simple comparison between 6 basic-like languages. I'm going to be running 2 tests, a sorting test and then a sprite rendering test for each of these languages. So before I go into the tests, got their pages up, and I'm just going to briefly go over each one of these languages, starting with RCBasic. Um, as many who are probably watching this knows, I am the guy who made RCBasic, so I have a little bit of bias towards this during these tests, but I will try to keep all these tests fair. Um, RCBasic's just a simple, basic-like programming language for making 2D games. Next is the SDL Basic, which is a basic interpreter designed for 2D game development. Um, Next is Cerberus X, which is a um, basic compiler slash transpiler for making 2D and 3D games. And it is object oriented, so you're able to use classes and all the other features that comes with object oriented programming. Next is Micro A, which is an experimental interpreter, not really designed for game development, but we will at least try to see what it is capable of in the sprite rendering tests. Next is AOZ or AOZ. I'll probably just call it AOZ for this. And it is a successor to the old Amos programming language on the Amiga, which is kind of the grandfather of both SDL Basic and RC Basic. And last is Naalaa, which is a language designed for 2D game programming, but with a lot of optimizations for performance. So, with that out of the way, let's go into the tests. I'm going to bring up the SDL Basic IDE real quick. I'll just go ahead and start with SDL Basic for this test. Since this demo, the Sprite demo is a demo from SDL Basic, and this demo I rewrote for all of the other programming languages. I tried to stay as close to the implementation here as possible, but I did have to deviate because of certain features that were lacking in some languages or different ways of doing things. The other test is a test that's going to do a quick sort and a bubble sort, and it will record the time for each sort, and we'll just take the lowest times out of 3 runs on the sort demo, and we'll record that as the time for the test. So let's go ahead and start with SDL Basic. Alright, so we have 0.237 and 0.315. Let me bring up. So 0.237 and 315. Alright, let's run this test again. 0.191, which is quite a bit faster, and 0.259, which is also quite a bit faster. Alright, and one more time. and 0.157 and 0.267. So I think we have our fastest times out of that. And now let's do the Sprite demo. And this is just averaging. We'll let it run until it stabilizes. I've ran it a few times. I think it usually stabilizes like around, low 300s. So yeah, so about 318. Oh, let's go. Yeah, we'll say about 318. So and next, let's go to RCBasic and we'll do the test there. So 3 runs on sort. .15 and .295. Alright, 2 more times. Oops. 16304. Alright. And one more time. 0.17 and 305. Alright. So we got our fastest times from there. Let's run the sprite test. And looks like it's starting to stable out. Is it still going? Yeah, it looks like it's stable out. So we'll say like 495. And now Naalaa. So let's run this sort here. Alright, 0.056 and 0.097. Alright, 2 more times. 0.51, that is faster, so I'll record that. And 7.3, it's a decent bit faster. Right, one more time. 0.59 and 0.86, so not faster than the last one. And now our sprite test for Naalaa. Looks like it might be stabling out, or maybe around 468. Oh, it's gone up to 470. See if it dips again. Yeah, we'll say like 470. Alright. Next, we'll do Cerberus X. And with Cerberus, when you launch this, it launches it in the browser. So, alright, 0.004 and 0.002. I don't think you could get much faster than that, but we'll see. Um, nope, it doesn't look like you are going to get much faster than that. 4 and 2 is still faster. And last one. 4 and 3. Alright, so we got our fastest times from Cerberus. Let's run our sprite tests on this. And for Cerberus, I did try to. I don't know if vsync is on or not. I ran the command from the documentation that was supposed to disable it, but it doesn't seem to ever get over 60, which makes me think that maybe vsync is on. But after I mean, it looks like it's stabilized now. We'll say about 5.9. Um, so let me record that. So in the Cerberus documentation, it did say that where is it? Where did I put it? Here. So this function set swap interval, if you pass 0 to it, that's supposed to disable vsync, which so API, I think it's under app, and yeah, so let's go here, and it does say right here, setting the swap interval to 1 effectively enables vsync, 0 disables it. So that should be disabled, so I have to assume that that is the actual rendering speed with vsync disabled. But if anybody's watching this and sees that I did something wrong, then please let me know. I dug through that documentation for hours, and that's the best I came up with. So our next test is going to be AOZ, and we'll run a short test first. This I have discovered something. I mean, AOZ. I'm gonna talk about all of these later, but AOZ's got like just some blatant lies in their documentation. But one of them I will go over right now is timer. Timer is not in milliseconds. It says in the documentation that timer is in milliseconds, but I have confirmed through multiple tests that timer is seconds, not milliseconds. So um, the reason why that's important is well, it's going to produce a really small number, so small, in fact, that the calculations that I was doing for the other demo so far will not work here. So we're going to manually figure out the difference because AOZ also has a problem with floating point math, which you'll see here. It's going to output some extra numbers. Splash screen every time. So we have these numbers. Our first one, 359. We take that number and we divide that by 1,000, and that'll give us the FPS. Well, well, the I, the it'll give us the time in seconds. Yeah. So for that it's gonna be 0.359, and this other one, let's pull up the calculator. And do 569 minus 359. So it's going to be 0.210. Alright, and let's run this 2 more times. So 0.328, and let's see, 9 minus 0.211, which is higher than our last one. And last one is 0.346, and let's just do 559 minus 346, 0.213, which is higher than our lowest one so far. So we have our time for sort. Let's run our sprite test. And another thing is, I had to make a concession with AOZ, and that is the background layer. I was trying to render it to like one of its virtual screens, and then like just have that virtual screen just stay static. But since I couldn't do that, the background layer is actually rendered with tiles, because it's literally the only thing that worked. And then I'm sorry, it's rendered with sprites, and then there's sprites that are overlaid. But because of that, the top part, I mean, let me run it, you'll see. Yeah, so this top part right here, I had to leave out so that the FPS counter would be visible. Let's see. Expecting this to stabilize around. Expecting it to probably get it like close to 300 at least. I think last time I ran this, it stabilized at 309. See if it goes a little bit higher this time. Um, and like I said, like I had to leave like the background layer off the top here, just because sprites draw over everything, including, you can see like in the little uh, bits that overlap here, they overlay on top of this white part where the text is being drawn at right there. So it looks like it's stabilized. Let's see if it drops again. Yeah, we'll say like 324. All right. It's quite a bit higher than the last time I ran it. And the last one is micro A. And for micro A, uh, sort is going to take a few seconds. It's micro A is pretty slow. So let's go ahead and run this. And 5.8 5, 6, and 11.84. Run this two more times. And while this is running, micro AI also ran into a number of issues with. Once I get through all of these tests, I will go into the issues I ran into with each of these languages, but I probably ran into the most issues with micro A and AOZ. Um, 5.92, right. And this looks like it's taking a lot longer than last two times, so I'm expecting this time to be much slower. Yeah. So we have our times. Now for the sprite rendering tests, I only got micro A to render a max of 7 sprites. The other languages were rendering 1024 sprites, but micro A, um, for one thing, arrays don't seem to work, or like they're inconsistent in how they work. So in order to get this to work at all, I created individual variables for each of like the sprite's positions and directions. But that, and along with these if statements, this is the max micro A can handle without crashing. And it's only like 7 sprites. And with these 7 sprites, like literally, if I added like another if statement, it wouldn't even run. Um, so micro A seems, and it doesn't even matter how much memory your computer has. It seems like it's completely limited. So I'm going to write down 0 for the sprite rendering test for micro A because it literally just can't do it. Um, so now that we've gotten all those tests out of the way, let me briefly go over pros and cons for each of these languages. I guess I will go in order. So let's start with SDL Basic. Pros is it's like very, very simple to get up and like running. Like to you can start drawing on the very first line in SDL Basic. There's like no boilerplate, no setup or anything. Um, I'd say another pro for SDL Basic is it's got a um, really feature-packed 2D graphics library. Um, Even though it's older than some of the other languages, it's actually more capable in 2D than like and then I'd say AOZ or Cerberus X. Simply because it's just got more features for manipulating images in memory versus those other two, which seem to be designed more towards you have like just like assets ready to go that are already like ready to load. Um, Another feature of SDL Basic, and I'm going to go over this for all the languages. SDL Basic has really good documentation. Like it covers everything, and it covers everything pretty in depth too. So like it lists all of the commands by feature, but you can also get like a full alphabetical list of all the commands. Um, it even goes over to IDE, which is something that documentation in a lot of the other languages, including RCBasic, doesn't have. Um, and the it explains all of its basic features pretty in depth as well, which is something not a lot of the other languages does have. I'd say the cons are the examples. So a lot of the examples in SDL Basic, like including this one right here, which is what I converted into all those other languages. Um, there is like, if you notice, no comments on this at all. And a lot of the examples in SDL Basic are like that, where it'll have like no comments or very few comments. You have like, in the example, like lots of stuff jumbled up on a one line rather than split, which I don't think is extremely helpful for beginners. Like this looks like word salad right here. So and the editor seems to, while the editor is pretty packed and stuff, it does have like its downsides. Like, I can't move tabs around on this editor. This editor also doesn't have a symbol browser or project browser, or so that would be like some downsides. But overall, I'd say for as old as SDL Basic is, it holds up pretty well. So next, I will go over my own language, and I'm going to try to be as objective as possible. Um, so I think my like strengths of RC Base would be like basically the same as strengths of SDL Basic. It's got a really involved 2D graphics library. It covers a lot of what you would want to do in 2D. Um, it makes it simple to make variables, and it deals with floating point by default, which some could see as a weakness or strength, but I see it as a strength because you'll see why when I get to other languages. But like basically, for example, if I wanted to make like a variable x and say it's equal to like 5.3, I can do that, and then I can do y equals x divided by 2, and it would do that math. Um, that seems like it would be like something that isn't a big deal, but you're going to see when I get to some of these other languages, it's actually a little bit bigger deal than you would think. Um, cons, I would say my documentation is kind of lacking in RC Basic. So uh, actually, I you can go to documentation from the editor. So let's go to documentation. Um, it is for the most part pretty complete, but like if you go to like some of these commands, like it's I know I could explain some of this stuff better. I know it doesn't come off as like something that's super understandable to like newcomers, and I've been like slowly working on it over time, but uh, documentation and development and then documentation. It's like you're trying to find that fine line to where you're not working on either one too long. Um, Another thing too is I don't have as many examples as a lot of the other languages, so that's one thing I'm also working on. Um, and yeah, I think maybe better descriptions on how certain things work would do me a lot of good. Um, and as far as the editor goes, I think the editor, our RC Basics editor, this is actually a in development version, so this has some extra stuff that isn't actually in the stable release yet. Like this project symbol browser isn't actually available yet. It's something I'm still working on. But it has a complete symbol browser. It has a project browser. I think the projects themselves needs a little bit more like more work done as far as how they're presented. these are not in alphabetical order. They're just in order by how they're added. So that's something that could be worked on and improved as well. So next, let's go to Naalaa. So Naalaa, I actually I mean, as far as the language goes, I don't really have a whole lot of cons. Naalaa is great. It has a pretty solid 2D library. It comes bundled with a lot of external modules. I think the documentation for the most part is pretty good. It's pretty fast. It's like on the sorting test anyway. I believe it was probably the fast. Well, no. I think Cerberus was the fastest, but this is still really fast. Um, and it's got lots of like optimization options for you to dive into. So I would say the only cons is that floating point thing I was talking about earlier that RCBasic had as a pro. Um, if we look in it, let me see if I can find it. So like this line right here, for instance, this took me a while to figure out, but Naalaa um, forces you to deal with floating point to integer conversions like every single time. Like integers and floats cannot exist in the same expression together without a conversion. And it's it's actually kind of annoying to be honest because C++ even does those conversions on the fly. I don't know why I had to do this so many times, but it got pretty annoying. Um, and I'd say another downside with Naalaa is like there's some basic features that I feel like needs a little bit better explaining inside of the documentation. One of them being this set image. So set image is an extremely useful thing to do in Naalaa. It's basically the equivalent of the screens in SDL Basic or canvases in RC Basic. It allows you to draw directly to an image, and this is how the sprite test worked in Naalaa. Um, but I actually found this in the documentation by accident, so I think that needs to have like a prominent page in the documentation. And also the editor is pretty bare bones. There's no code completion. There's no symbol browser. There's no ability to move your tabs around. But I do like that Naalaa comes with all of these extra tools. So Naalaa comes with like a tile map editor. It's pretty simplistic, but just the fact that it's there is pretty awesome. It has a polygon editor, a resource editor, and then this like Doom style editor that you can use to build levels for Naala's like uh, it comes with this like Doom style library. It's called Gloom, I think. But uh, yeah, Naalaa is for all the stuff it's lacking, it makes up for it with the stuff it has. So overall, I think Naalaa is pretty solid. Next, let's go to Cerberus X. So Cerberus X, I also think it's pretty solid. I don't have a whole lot of complaints for it. Um, I will say this much: Cerberus X is uh, extremely object oriented. I think it takes after Java quite a bit. That's either a strength or a weakness depending on how you feel about object oriented programming. I personally am not a huge fan, but if you are, this is the language for you. I think it does object oriented programming pretty well. Um, Nothing about it was overly complex in my opinion, but I do think the documentation was difficult to dive through. So here's the documentation, and like it was really difficult to figure out things like I had a hard time figuring out how to find like how to disable vsync. Like I was just digging through like uh, option after option until I just randomly came across it. There was other things too I was trying to find documentation on and I couldn't find. And I think ultimately, yeah, maybe having something like a search feature in the documentation would be useful for Cerberus X because everything is like something inside of something else. So like, this mojo.input, mojo.graphics. But if you go into mojo.graphics, you have like the canvas and well, I thought Canvas was part of it. So I'm already getting confused. So I think that is something Cerberus could improve on. It has by far one of the best IDEs though. Like no complaints about the IDE at all. This IDE is just solid. So next we will go to AOZ, and I I'm gonna be honest. I genuinely just do not like this. I mean, not just talking about the IDE. The IDE is pretty good, but like AOZ is just like the overall presentation. This is the only language we covered that is actually a commercial product. So for this to be something that they expect you to pay money for, I feel like it's lacking quite a bit, especially in its documentation. For one thing, like the link here, that documentation link, it doesn't even work. If you click on it, yeah. Um, so you have to go into your browser, go to the website, which is not the end of the world. But then you get to the documentation, which let me get into this. Uh, it takes a while to load. All right, so once you get into the documentation, there's just some stuff that's just flat out like made up in this documentation. For one thing, let me see if I can find a timer. This says it returns slash sets the number of milliseconds since the application was launched. That's wrong. That's completely wrong. It returns the number of seconds since the application has launched. So I figured that out by realizing something was off with the numbers I was getting during these tests, and I was like, wait, this isn't milliseconds, this is seconds. So this is, that was one thing. It's kind of a big deal for this function to be wrong because timing is a big part of, game development. Another thing too is actors. Like none of these commands worked. Like literally none of them. It's like they don't even exist. They don't even have syntax highlighting, so I'm pretty sure they don't exist. So actors are supposed to replace sprites. And you see how sprites are like highlighted light blue, letting you know that it's a built-in command. Now, if I type in actor, nothing. It doesn't even bring up like something to complete, like. But if you type in sprite, you get all of these sprite commands and stuff. Um, there's like a lot of other like discrepancies in the documentation. Stuff was hard to find. The stuff that was there didn't work. Just trying to finish this sprite demo and AOZ was painful. The examples in AOZ also, almost none of them go over how to use images. And this is another thing with both AOZ and Cerberus X. You have to have like your directory structure set up a certain way in order to be able to like load images and stuff. So in the case of AOZ, you have to create this resources folder and then put your images inside of that. And then once you do that, you don't even load the image; they're just automatically loaded. It was really really weird getting used to that. So overall, I was kind of disappointed in AOZ. I was expecting a little bit better experience, especially for a commercial product. Um, Lastly, let's go over Micro A. Micro A has got a lot of issues. For one thing, the editor itself. Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and start with just the editor. The editor has like some just stability issues. I guess I can show you one thing I thought was really weird. So I'm just gonna create a new file in the editor, and then I'm gonna just like, let's just say I'm gonna just start typing something. So like, let's just do var x, and then I'm gonna click off the tab and click back on it, and it's gone. Um, I and I yeah I noticed that randomly because I was like copying stuff out of out of one tab and just trying to put it into an empty tab just so I could delete it here and like and have it saved for later. But if you don't save a new tab, it'll just get rid of all of the text that you put into it. Another thing too is you cannot well, you have to go up to here to close the new tab. Um, there's some other stuff in this editor too. Like the editor itself like doesn't have basic features all the other editors had, like find and replace, and also save as does not work at all. So if you go to save as, let's just save this as testing.bas and click save. And like we'll make a note of this. I'm going to copy this directory so I know I'm going back to the right directory. I'm going to click save. Now I'm going to go to open and make sure we're in the right directory, and no testing.bs. Save as just does not work at all. A lot of yeah, that's also annoying, these pop-ups. Another thing too is some of these features just it's coming soon, but like I don't know why they're even in the menu if they just don't work like that. Um, and then problems with the language itself. Arrays don't seem to work consistently. So I originally had all of these as arrays like I did in all the other examples, but the values in arrays would just get reset every time. But it doesn't happen if you manually just make a bunch of variables like this. But you're limited by the number of variables you can make in microarray. Actually, you're just limited by the amount of code you can have in a program. Like I said, if I added one more sprite to this program, it would crash. I guess I could show that too. So let me just copy this and paste this here. Just going to change all of these to 7s. I would like to do a replace, but microarray doesn't have a replace in its editor, so got to do this manually. Uh, yeah. And last one. So let's go ahead, and now that we have added that code for it, also we need to add a 7 here. And this it's called 7, but this will be like the eighth sprite we're trying to draw in this program, and this will basically cause it to crash. It's done it to me a number of times already. So, and let's just go and create that variable that we were using. So, oh yeah, now let's go ahead and try to show image for 7. And run. Yep, basically failed. So like yeah, so I think microarray has some real stability issues. Another thing too is the simple browser. It only works when you first load a file, and then it just doesn't do anything else again after that. So if I tried to make a new function, um, I think this is how you do it. But yeah, you notice it doesn't pop up in the browser at all. Um, Another thing, but if like just to oh well, save as doesn't even work, so there's no point in doing that. Yeah, lots of random weird issues with micro A. Let me go ahead and get rid of those. Uh, did it? Uh, all right. Reason why I'm going back to this is because this is like the only copy of this. I haven't uploaded this yet. I am planning on uploading all the code for all these examples, and I'll provide a link in the description. But yeah, that's my issues with microwave. Outside of that, though, microwave does do some things pretty well. It does manage to keep its feature set pretty small, which does make it really easy to dig through all the documentation. And microwave does have some pretty good documentation. So all of this stuff was explained, and even though it's like short descriptions, it was very easy to understand. I was able to figure out most of this pretty easily. Also, microwave comes with a ton of examples, so it's a good thing. It made it a lot easier to like be able to learn this stuff really easily. But there's just like for like 2D graphics in particular, it's like lacking like some pretty basic features, and also it's like having to specify the width and the height and the color depth when you load an image, um, as well as all the stuff you have to specify when you're showing an image. I think I don't think there's a reason why you should have to do that. Um, Yeah, but it's pretty solid for an experimental interpreter. I'm just venting my frustrations because like I dealt with that whole Sprite thing in particular for hours, like literally hours. I spent like I think like half a day trying to get microwave to render more than 6 or 7 sprites, and then I eventually had to give up. Um, so that is it for my comparison video of these languages. Um, I'm going to provide the source code, so feel free to if if you feel like I mean if you're like one of the developers on one of these languages and you feel like I have misrepresented it in some way, I did try to be as fair as possible. I read all the documentation on all of them for as long as I possibly could, and like some of them I had documentation that was easy to get through, and then like AOZ for instance was like that documentation was just awful. Um, but yeah, if you want, download the source code. Like I said, link will be in the description, and feel free to provide corrections or improvements to that code, and maybe I'll come back and do this again. All right, I will see you in the next video.